Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So who is this against? Well, it is against none other than Anthon2010, who I believe does have a winning record against me. So let's get to it. I like to just put away the record, and everyone's a great player. All right, I'm telling you that I'm beatable, and everyone human is beatable. It just takes that amount of effort, that out strategizing that's going to help you carry it over. So in this game, I played my favorite, or one of my favorites, or one of my tricks, the Owen's defense, e4, b6, d4, bishop to b7, bishop to d3, e6. I'm not engaging, but I'm saying if you play e5, I'm going to take g2 and I'm going to take the rook. Knight c3, bishop to b4, queen e2, d6. Bishop d2, I play c5. I'm slowly striking in the center, and I'm saying if you play e5 still, I still have this. So after d5, I said I'm going to castle. And later on, I'm going to get my rook out, and hopefully you'll let me take on d5. And after f4, which was a little bit adventurous, I would have suggested the move d takes e6 simply because this rook is no longer going to have a direct target on this e file, right? It's hard to understand why, but the reason is because in the game, f4, I now play e takes d5. And if you play e takes d5, there's rook to e8. Saying, I pinned your queen and king. What are you going to do now? So if knight to e4, there's bishop takes d2, right? King takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and f5 with the pin, and it's not looking great there. So what else happens? Well, bishop to e4, there's bishop takes c3. So the only move here is bishop to e3. What happens there? Queen to e7. King to d2, b5. Now this is the hardest move to find out of all the moves I have. b5. What am I doing? Well, I'm saying you're pinned here, so your knight cannot move to take this pawn, right? And if pawn takes here, I'm just going to say I'll take this pawn, right? So what I'm doing right now is I am dismantling the center, and that's something I want to do. After b3, well, takes, bishop takes d5. And what I'm saying now is, if you take, knight takes, I have eyes on this c3 knight. If you play rook to c1, I have eyes on this bishop. I have eyes on this knight. I could even play knight to c6. I could ignore each of those two things and still keep the pressure here. Because if, let's say, knight to f3, well, I could even possibly have knight takes e3 followed by knight to d4. So things are possible. The tension is brewing up. So here, bishop to f2, bishop takes c3, threatening the king and the rook, and our friend Anthon2010 resigns. So that was a quick demolishment. What happened? Knight f6, and it was all okay here. c5. So the d5 is okay, but from here on out, I would say here maybe a3 here. I don't know. I would suggest a3 simply because the bishop probably would do a more active role on g5, but also because I want this pawn to be protected, right? This pawn is going to protect this pawn, and it's going to feel more safe. I'm still going to play c5, and here white has the move f4, and knight f3 and castle. But in the game, after bishop d2, c5, d5, there's no longer this possibility of f4, e5, because after castles, f4, e takes d5, and now, let's say white takes with this pawn. What's going to happen? Rook to e8, and I'm going to say, I'm going to threaten knight takes d5 because of this pin. Right, so that's one thing I'm threatening. So in the game, white had a very different way of thinking about it. And it's just that it didn't go the way that we thought it would. So the thing is that after here I have all my threats laid out, right? It's not looking great for white because of this line, right? So the essence here is that after d5 castles, this line is going to be very dangerous if white opens it. So after d takes e6, f takes e6, now all of a sudden this line is not open anymore, and white can develop with like knight f3, castles, and it's more harmless, right? So in this game, unfortunately, things just had to open up in the center, and that's why I won. So the next game against Anthon was one I lost. d4, d5, knight c3, e6, bishop f4, c5. So this is often referred to as the Jobava London. And in the Jobava London, we have pretty simple intentions. Number one, we open up the possibility of knight to b5. Number two, we open ourselves to maybe a king side push, because that's something we have to think about in a Jobava London. So then, after a6, I play knight f3. So you might think, okay, well, white has all these three pieces that are developed, but black has none developed, right? So this is a benefit to the Jobava London, is that the benefit is that using this knight b5 and c7 threat, it's going to scare black opponents from developing their pieces, because they're going to have to first, they want to play c5, but at the same time, the Jobava London does a good job of saying, maybe I want to come here, maybe I want to set up a push. So it's very ambitious of a system. Knight c6, bishop to e2. So after bishop to e2, knight f6, h3. So now notice that I've developed all my pieces. The only problem with this is that I'm not developing my pieces in the best squares. And that's certainly a concern, but it just makes it so that my plan in the middle game is not very clear. It's not very clear what it's going to be, but I'm just rolling with it. I'm developing all my pieces, and I'm going with it. And now b5. So it's somewhat clear that black has sort of a plan. Maybe bishop b7, queen b6, bishop d7, castles. So you can already see that black's starting to expand on the queen side. But white's sort of like, I'm laying low, and I'm going to wait till later. So I play a3, queen to b6, castles. So nothing's happening so far. Queen to d3, and now I'm changing my plan, because I've sort of said, okay, well, black wants to expand on the queen side. So how can I do it so I expand on this side? So I said bishop d7, and at bishop d7, I thought, do I like that move? I don't know. So I played knight to e3, c3, just solidifying my pawn structure here. I'm leaving no holes behind, and knight to a5. So black or our friend Anton has got a brilliant plan. So now I play knight e5. I'm saying, I want to put my knights on powerful squares. But at the same time, after knight c4, I'm going to play a very tricky move. I'm going to play bishop to g5 and say, if you take on e5, pawn takes and bishop takes bishop. So that was my plan. But here there's actually a few moves to prevent it. Queen to c7, number one, saying I'm now opening the option to take on e5 because now the queen attacks e5. Right? So another way to think about this is that now the queen defends this bishop on d7. So this is no longer a threat. So two threats are gone, but now white has to deal with this threat of b2, and most of the ways out involve an exchange. Knight takes bishop, bishop takes knight, knight takes knight. They all involve an exchange. So in this case, rook fd8 happened. I was like, ooh, I'm sort of relieved. So then I play rook a to b1, saying, I don't want to lose this guy. This guy protects the two important pawns, and it's important to keep them at bay. h6, bishop to h4, and now g5. And this is what I would consider aggressive, but logical. Bishop g3, knight to e4. And all of a sudden, these knights are looking very, very powerful. And here I missed a move. I don't know how I missed it. In a usual game, I would spot it, but I think there is this move, bishop to h5. After bishop to e8, well, knight takes c4, b takes c4, and queen to f3. This is what I should have done, because after knight takes knight to d2, I have bishop takes f7. And it's obvious, you can see my queen is coming into h5, and there will be plenty of damage done. So this is what I should have done, but instead, what did I do? I was very passive. I played the move knight takes, queen to e3. In a sense, I wanted to get f4 in. So after f5, I said bishop to h2. Now, I debated on knight g6 a little bit. I debated on bishop h2, whether I had to bring it back. I thought about f4 and whether it was helping my position or whether it was closing down my position. But I decided in the end bishop h2, f4, queen to c1, bishop to e8, choosing a very interesting diagonal for the bishop. Looking for this diagonal, saying, my plan is this, take, get my bishop on this diagonal, and have fun. So that was the plan on black's part. Now, what I should have done is I should have played g3. I should have freed myself from the mess, played g4, and reactivated my bishop. But what did I do instead? I played bishop to d1. I was saying, I want to put it to c2. I want to focus on this open diagonal and try to do something with it. Bishop to d6, and I realized at this moment that I had erred, because here my opponent's plan to go bishop to g6 to push d4 it was much faster than mine. So knight f3, rook to b8, bishop to c2, bishop to g6, and at this moment I played knight to e1. So you can see the motivation, the incentive is shifting from white to black. That's where I'll leave you, and we'll see you next time.